We are now going to head to our keynote workshop, and Professor Curtis Bonk, all the way from Indiana University, is going to now run that workshop. But I'm going to give him another quote because, you know, when you get on in years like me and him, you can't remember all the brilliant things and not so brilliant things you may have said. Well, I think this is a great thing that he said. So Curtis, you said, "What is clear is that human learning is now in a state of significant flux. During this flux, we have entered the age of Education 3.0, a time when instructors increasingly act as learning concierges, curators, consultants, and counselors to give voice to their learners and to grant them multiple opportunities and pathways to learn." Love it. It's very poetic. I love what you're saying. And so we're going to hand over to you for your workshop as you unpack this further. Over to Curtis.
So, thanks for inviting me back for round two. And I'm the only thing separating you from break time. So I'll try to make sure we get done on time with part two. You'll notice this is pink week. I even have pink socks on. Last week was black week, and the week before was purple week. Week before that was white week. I was wearing white shirts every day. This week I'm going to wear pink shirts and ties every day, and I have a hat to hold my thoughts in. So I don't want to lose some of the ideas, but I have trimmed this talk down a bit. If you download it from trainingshare.com, there'll be more slides than what I'm talking about in this 40-minute slot. And I may skip a few things along the way, and that's totally expected. And we may have a conversation. You may be asking me questions along the way, and I'll try to monitor a little bit what's happening in the chat. But we'll also field some of those at the end. So again, thank you for this. And so we can kind of think about, that was big picture before, and now this is in the trenches. What can we actually do to enliven our online, fully online, or blended, or technology integrated environments? And I've designed two models or frameworks that I'm going to talk about in this section. Those are the things that are important in the long run. For next week's teaching, maybe one of the technology tools or activities that I mentioned might be beneficial.
We seem to have lost Curtis for a moment. I could just take over, and if he had sent me the script. So I think it's because he's having a pink moment or a think moment. Hopefully he will be returning. So we're going to just see if we can.
Which you can download for free. Everybody's been talking about blended, so there are some free reports from the Online Learning Consortium, from UNESCO, from the World Bank, from an assortment of places that talk about blended. The Commonwealth of Learning in Vancouver talks about blended. So this report up here is planning for a blended future from the Online Learning Consortium. You can click on the link at the top and download it. You can also get a free book from my former student, Brian Beatty here. He teaches HyFlex model at San Francisco State University, and many people around the world are having him speak on this due to the pandemic. And I want to apologize to the person signing right now. I've been going a little fast to start. But this book you can download, and it has chapters talking about different types of environments to use HyFlex model. And so I highly recommend any book that's free, edtechbooks.org/HyFlex. And HyFlex is the combination of both face-to-face and online, and letting the students decide, as was just mentioned, Britta mentioned, I mentioned it earlier, to decide on remote or face-to-face or moving back and forth. The important thing is to engage the learners, as Jean-Luc Picard said in Star Trek Next Generation. And so I have a whole chapter in the Adding Tech Variety book about engagement. And so some of you have been sending me text messages, chat messages on how to engage. I just say, download the free book and read the chapter on engagement. It might come in handy, I don't know. But I changed activity one. I've moved it back. The person signing might say, "Where's activity one? It was supposed to be the second slide." Well, I changed it when Britta was talking. I asked in the chat, how can you motivate or engage learners online? What words come to mind when I say engagement or motivation? You might say money or feedback or fun or something else. What words come to mind? I'm just curious. Everyone can type in the chat. I'm just curious what people will say. Well, someone gonna have a night? No one's got something. First one, come on, please. Oh. In the chat window, okay, carrot and sticks, of course. Marks and marking and participation and problem solving. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Rena. Gamification, there we go. Jeremiah, Hasina, okay. We're moving now. Scenario-based learning, okay. Bobby, making it fun. Okay, great. So I've designed the TEC-VARIETY model based on 40, 50 years of motivation research that I read. In particular, the research from Michigan State, a guy named Jerry Brophy. So you'll see the 10 terms there: tone, encouragement, curiosity. It's tech, variety, autonomy. You see the other words down below that, relevance and all that. I'm going to walk through those 10. And then if you can read Chinese, the book is there on the right and in English in the middle. And we actually finished a new book that's going to be free this week or next week. It's coming out from the Commonwealth of Learning. That's COL.org. Commonwealth of Learning in Vancouver. They're also in Delhi. My good friend Sanjaya Mishra commissioned Elaine Coe from Massey University in New Zealand. She was at Waikato University before that. Her and I did this first book free. Now we have a second short book, and we're gonna have it's gonna have a course. We've designed an entire course that's free. It was designed for, the Commonwealth of Learning's helping former British colonies in the global South trying to ramp up their teaching. And so this course in particular is meant for educators to learn how to motivate students online. So if this talk is kind of short, which it is, you might go to the new free book. And again, this is going to be any day now, and it's going to be a PDF. It won't be a physical book at this point. In that book, in both my 100 activity books, the R2D2 book and the TEC-VARIETY book, we have labeled all activities from the degree of time, risk, and cost, because people want low risk, low cost, low time. And so there's many in there that you can choose that are that. Some are higher risk. Craig might try some higher risk and higher time. And, things are very teacher, oh no, he would do student-centered things. Right, Craig? So some examples of TEC-VARIETY in the TEC-VARIETY framework. These are my students last semester. Some of these are my students this semester. We're using Padlet as a way to introduce each other. It's a free tool, kind of like sticky notes on a wall. And if you haven't seen Padlet, it's a very popular tool in the UK and in Australia, I've noticed. In the US, it's starting to find traction. But I like it. I'm finding it better than learning management systems out there. And it's very flexible. You can embed videos and pictures and whatnot. I'm also using Jamboard for many activities. Jamboard's a Google tool and it's free. And so here I'm asking students, I'm just asking them questions about their backgrounds, their interests, uses, just a warm-up activities. So number one of the TEC-VARIETY model is tone or climate. This is humanistic psychology, helping students be all that they can be, helping them find a comfortable learning environment, psychological safety, as Abraham Maslow said and Carl Rogers said. So we use Jamboards, just get ideas up there and share those ideas. We use a Padlet just to brainstorm ideas based on a simple question, and then I can come back to them. So when I lecture like this, I often open a Padlet or Jamboard for students to post questions for me. Or we go into the breakout room in Zoom to have some interaction. So it's not just me presenting. They go into small groups and ask each other questions, introduce each other to each other, share a link, share expectations, share the readings, something where they can talk in small groups of 3 or 4 and have some identity as a learner, have some connectedness to other learners. So they're just not just listening to me. Or we might use Flip-A-Grid, which is now just called Flip, I guess. My good colleague, Charlie Miller at the University of Minnesota, where they talk funny up there in Minnesota. Anyhow, I think they're all from Norway. And so Charlie built Flip-Grid and he sold it to Microsoft. And he's now a vice president at Microsoft, and they made it free. This is free to the world to have threaded video discussions on different topics. So my students introduce each other with a short 1-minute, 2-minute video, or they might talk about a topic in Flip-A-Grid. It's very functional. And Charlie, I wrote him a tenure letter. I got him help him get him tenure, and then he quits after he develops this cool kind of tool. There's another cool tool that gets at number 2, encouragement. So Quizlet is a tool that lets you do online practice tests. And they have examples that you can borrow and change and remix, interactive flashcard kinds of things, which is boring. It's old school, but students love this stuff. They love to know if they know the content. There's also feedback through credentials and certificates today, micro-credentials. And so on your mobile device, you might do short bursts of learning. And we're moving to that. You might use Kahoot. This is also developed in Norway. I met the professor, computer science person who built this. Kahoot enables you to do competitions in your class on different topics. And it gets a lot of fun. Students want to do better. They can have pseudonames or avatars, and they enter their answers with their mobile devices. And so it's kind of a fun little way. You can also use, these poll everywhere tools and so forth. Number 3 is curiosity. The gentleman on the right with the dog just traveled around the entire world walking. It took him 7 years. So if you want to talk about fitness with your students, you might share the news about the gentleman who's 104 years old just ran a marathon. He started running marathons when he was 80. He's from India. Or the woman from Japan who's the fastest sprinter, centenarian. All these, or paleontology, a new dinosaur is discovered every week. If you teach paleontology, the news. So number 3 is interactive multimedia news to inspire, to get people curious about things. Now, I teach psychology and technology. There's news every day. In every discipline, there's a news story you can embed every day. Number 4 gets us at variety, fun, fantasy. Many of you put in the chat, fun. You want to have students fun. Well, asking students not just brainstorming, but reverse brainstorming. How can we decrease creativity in schools and in colleges instead of how to increase it and have it more of a fun and engaging kind of thing? And you wouldn't believe what students are posting in the Jamboards or Padlets or those kinds of things. Number 5 is choice. Choice. So I tell my students in my learning theories class, there are 20 MOOCs out there. If you sign up for any of them and write a reflection paper, you can eliminate the midterm assignment. And if you get a certificate of completion, you can eliminate the final. In effect, I'm encouraging them to take another course while they're taking my course. They're taking 2 courses. They're learning twice as much, but it's fun. They've chosen to do so. So the woman there holding up the doors teaches the largest class in the world. It's a course on wellness, happiness. Now, she's at Yale University. She's taught millions of people. Her name is Lori Santos, and we studied it. And how did she get millions of people to take her class? And we all want to know. And so we've designed 15 guidelines, and someone just sent me an email. I'll send you my paper after this session. We've written a paper on how to get people to sign up for all this, to take your English classes or sociology or computer science or happiness, you know. So I've designed, and my colleagues and I have designed a podcast show. It's called Silver Lining for Learning. We thought the pandemic would be over in 1 or 2 months. So we just started on March 21st, 2020. And we're still going. We just had episode 121 2 days ago. And we're going to get an award at a conference next month, silverliningforlearning.org. That day, March 21st, 2020, I decided to go running before the show. I was visiting my son in Portland. I went running the next day, and then I flew home to Indiana. I've run every day since March 21st of 2020, 913 days in a row. I'm really stupid. And I'm not that fit. I'm kind of slow. But our podcast show is still going. And, you know, we had people in from Australia, New Zealand, from Kenya, from, you know, Italy, from all over the world, Myanmar, Korea, China. And we chat with them about all sorts of topics. We've archived, it's all archived. Everything's there. You can come live Saturday afternoons in the US or watch the archives. We've had penguin researchers from Antarctica. We've had kids in Nepal who are learning English through MOOCs. I'm researching these kids, these teenagers, taking dozens of MOOCs to learn any topic during the pandemic. It's really quite fascinating. Some future ambassadors of Nepal. So, you know, if you use these podcast shows or create these podcast shows, what can you do to enhance your pedagogy? You might use Donald Clark. My good friend Donald Clark from the UK has a new podcast show called Great Minds on Learning. It's fascinating. He's a brilliant guy. He was one of the first e-learning people in the world. He had an e-learning company and he sold it. Now he just travels the world just talking about e-learning. But he's got a website called Plan B. Just look him up, Donald Clark. So how do you use Donald Clark's podcast or my podcasts? Now, my podcast show is co-hosted by Professor Chris Dede at Harvard, Punya Mishra, the TPAC guy at Arizona State. You might have heard of TPAC. I heard it mentioned earlier. And then Young Zhao at the University of Kansas and the University of Melbourne. He's at 2 universities. So I tell my students, if you watch these and write a reflection paper on them, you know, look for themes on them. That could be your midterm assignment. Or maybe have a debate on the podcast. Or maybe have them interview the people in the podcast show. Or maybe have them rank the podcasts or categorize them. There's all sorts of things you can do with this OER, Open Education Resources. And that's what today's learning is. It's about reusing, remixing, recreating, redistributing maybe, all this free stuff out there. I'm creating it, you're creating it. Now we gotta thoughtfully use all these contents. So the gentleman there with me, I bring someone in. In fact, I had a guest tonight in my class. Dr. Tom Reeves at the University of Georgia talked about authentic learning and his work in Australia on authentic learning in Perth, where he designed his model. He come in, every week we have someone, so Jima Nagaya came in last year. Now Jima took 700 MOOCs, probably the most in the world. His wife took over 100 too. I met with him at the bottom there. We were in Scotland for a conference a few years ago. He won an award for taking all these. So we asked him about his learning. Guests are a way to enliven your class, to connect the content to the real world, interviewing people about their careers. So the guy in the right, in the middle, in the right slide, that's Charlie Miller, who developed Flipgrid, just by the way. The guy on the right here, his name is Richard Mayer. He's the most famous educational psychologist in the world, or he's written the most of any, as of 20 years ago. He came into my class last year. He's fascinating. And he talks about how to design content to help students learn it that gets them to learn visually and verbally. the woman on the left is my former student, Vanessa Dennett at Florida State, talking about social media. The person who was supposed to come in and talk about social media got sick. And I called Vanessa up an hour before my class. Could you come and speak to my students about social media? And sure, she just jumps in. So I get book authors, article authors, or researchers. I get different guests every week to supplement the readings, to supplement my lectures, and make it much more engaging for my students. They can see that it's not me that's telling them this is important, it's other people. When someone else, when Richard Mayer tells you something's important, it is important. And then I have them reflect in the Jamboard of what they've learned and how they've learned it. So I open up a Jamboard and have them post the questions there. And I bring in other guests. So the guy there in the upper left, he was from Penn State University, and the guy in the middle is from Purdue. And one of them had just retired, the other one was about to retire, and have them reflect on their career. It's Kyle Peck is on the left, and Timothy Newmy is in the middle. Fascinating. I had never met them. Well, very briefly I met them. I never had a chance to talk to them. This was my chance to really reflect for an hour with these people about their careers. And they tell stories, and stories are what gets people to learn. It's about storytelling, not about lecturing to each other. It's about telling them about what engaged them, what inspired them to learn, and where they're going now, what's happening now. And so again, we put questions. And so we create an AMA. AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. So Tom Reeves came in last week and this week, and we asked him about his dogs. He has two dogs, not terriers. I'm blanking on it now. Westies. Tom has two Westies, award-winning, won national shows. And so they asked him anything about his career, about his life. He was almost going to be a priest at one point, all this, but how he got interested in educational technology and where his career started. AMA. My students asked me AMAs one weekend. I was surprised by all the questions that they asked. They asked real difficult questions of whether I really believed the stuff I was presenting. And last semester, I brought 3 of my colleagues in who I went to grad school with, 2 of whom were retiring that day, the next day, as a final career event. We had a panel about the past, present, and future of technology, and my students got to ask them anything. My friend Okwa Lee from Korea, Veronica Acosta from Cal State Long Beach, and Tom Reynolds, who's in Colombia, South America, as well as in California. Fascinating. And when you do all these things, you got to create a portal. So I've created a playlist of these videos, of these experts. So students can go through and listen to Richard Mayer, or listen to Kyle Peck, or listen to Punya Mishra talk about TPAC model, or Terry Anderson in Athabasca University in Edmonton, Canada. All these folks, they can come back to, what I'm also finding, a little side note, bringing young people is really important. It's good to have these, people who are in their late stages of career, but it's probably just as important, if not more important, to bring people who just graduated back and talk about real struggles or challenges or successes that they've had, because they're more similar in age. And they can see, you can ask them about their job, and they can see what skills they need, the competencies. Another thing for relevance is we're studying Duolingo, learning languages online, and asking people about what motivates you to learn a language through Duolingo or Babbel or Chinese Pod, Spanish Pod. And that's just fascinating too. I'm having a blast doing this research project. I've got 2 papers in review on Duolingo. If you want to read them, send me a note. One is about to be accepted for publication, I think. You can also do collaboration online, like with Trello, where you can see here moving to the right are one's note cards or time management tools. You can do collaborative learning or interactive learning by team summaries, having different teams compete for key points or questions that they might ask. You can also have people negotiate meetings in Google Documents or in meeting words or now comment. all these online sticky notes or collaborative technologies, having students interact with different color codes. So someone's team might be purple, another team might be orange or green. Number 7 is interactive and collaborative. I've used a tool called Neutrino, which is free. It's like sticky notes on the wall, but the problem is if something's deleted, it's permanently gone. So be careful using Neutrino, but you can have online role play, online debates, without having to get your students an email address or a university password or account. This works outside the university. Don't tell your university administrators. I'm going to get in trouble for that probably somewhere down the road, or you all can get in trouble for that. But another tool that you might use is called Perusal. I think Perusal was created at Harvard. And so at Indiana, we do not endorse using Perusal, actually, but faculty are using it anyways because it's free from Harvard. Why not use it? And so this enables you to do annotations of documents and collaborate with other teams when they annotate the documents. A similar tool is called ThingLink. In ThingLink, you can embed, apologies to the signer again, I'm so sorry. You're so fabulous. I love your support. Thank you. So in ThingLink, you can embed links for video, maybe have a podcast or a picture. So having hyperlinks within a picture frame, extending the learning. Engagement. You might have online lessons from NASA to teach science. The James Webb Telescope today, or Artemis 1 going to Mars or the moon. You know, all this is, you know, available for free from NASA. Why not take advantage of these free lesson plans to teach science, right? Another free tool is from Stanford, from my good friend, Paul Kim. Now, Paul and I were twin sons of different mothers. My son worked with Paul Kim in Tanzania and in Argentina, where they had kids type questions at different levels of difficulty. In the SMILE program, SMILE, Stanford Mobile Inquiry Learning Environment, will rank the levels of questions asked. Now, I'm just taking a look at the time, so I want to make sure I don't go over. I have till 10:40, so I do have 10 minutes. So I want to move through to the next model. I have about 11 minutes. But SMILE, take a look at SMILE. It's free. It will evaluate questions according to 5 levels, not Bloom's taxonomy, not 6, but 5 levels. It will generate questions. It's free to download. It's based on AI with millions of questions behind it. So you can have challenges, tension for who can have the hardest question or most highest level question. Number 9 is challenge, having video sharing wall competitions in Padlet or the Jamboard kinds of things. Number 10 is products, having students do a podcast show or an animation or a documentary or a song. I've had students write songs, or a website design or a timeline, using different timeline tools to summarize all their learning in a timeline, or having students create a brochure or an infographic in Canva. Canva was developed by the woman there in Australia, where I thought maybe Craig was from, because the voice sounds Australian, you know, kind of, you hear that. But she must be the world's youngest billionaire developing Canva. Canva's a free tool, but has a premium version that I just bought. I'm designing a 365-day calendar based on where I've been during my jogging. I've had these quotes on leadership, learning, and life in this calendar. I'm just about ready to go to press. Well, we use Canva for this. All this stuff is all these the days of the year. And you can do brochures, like I said, or flyers or infographics. You also do mind maps online, like using Minddomo or MindMeister or Glyphy. There's many of these mind mapping tools. My students summarize the discussion. They summarize the discussion forum as the starter or wrapper to the discussion using these mind maps. Knowledge is explicated, Knowledge is visualized, what we're learning, the connections, the interconnections, and so forth. So in the chat, put A if you got lots of ideas. Put B if you got several ideas. Put C if maybe you got something. Put D if not yet, but you hope you'll get it in the next part. Put E if your brain is not working today. Put F if I'm an idiot. If Dr. Bonk's an idiot, you didn't get anything. So I'm curious what people have gotten. So hopefully we didn't get too many Fs. Maybe just Craig got an F. So A's, some B's. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Vaughn. Thank you, Vino. Vino, do I know you? You're not the same Vino. Okay. Rejoice. I will rejoice when you put A instead of B. So Salo, salute to you. Great. It seems like a lot of connections. Well, I have more. I have the second model I can go through in 5 minutes. So that's the TEC-VARIETY framework. You do not have to do all of that to be a success. Just 5 or 6 or 4 of these ideas. And I could pick any one of these and say it's the most important. Number 1's the most important. When I moved to social icebreakers, I reduced dropouts from 30% to 0 by having, icebreakers. Tone, climate, this comfort. But number 2, everyone wants feedback. They want feedback. In a face-to-face, only a couple people want feedback. Online, everybody wants feedback. So feedback's the most important. Well, yeah, and you could say relevance is the most important, autonomy is the most, they're all the most important, right? So what I want you to do in the chat, I want you to pick one of those and say, which is to you is the most important? Which are you going to focus on this semester, this year? Pick one. I'm curious what people will pick. So, okay. Just kidding. So Malachi, okay, you picked A. Oh, thank you. Engagement, interactivity. Hasina, Andrew, Rena, okay, engagement, interactivity. Tone, relevance, all that. Bongi, great, okay. Rosemary, autonomy, thank you, Rosemary. Bridget, we have to talk about relevance. Okay, Anna, thank you, Anna. Okay, well, you guys are really great in all this. I want to talk about this other model, and you can read about it in the book. It's in here somewhere. But I wrote this R2D2 book, Read, Reflect, Display, and Do. This uses a learning style model, but I don't believe in learning styles. I'm an educational psychologist, and they don't believe in learning styles. They believe in building on preferences or strengths. And so we divide up the web into 4 things you can do. You can read, you can reflect on, you can display your learning, or do something. Now you can go in reverse and start with doing, and then reflecting, and then reading. You don't have to go in this order, but it's one order. It's one way to think about what you can do online. This is simplifying what you can do. So you asked me about this. So my colleague, Dr. Kajang at Wayne State, and I did this book together. We also did one of the MOOCs in open education. You'll notice her name in the MOOCs in the Global South. So Ka and I have done a couple things together, and here we're spelling R2D2 apparently, So the first one gets us auditory learners. And the guy in the bottom there had a show called Reading Rainbow, and he's had the visor in Star Trek Next Generation. And at one conference, he was standing right next to me. And his name is Geordi LaForge in Star Trek, and he didn't have his visor on, so I didn't recognize him. He's also in Roots. If you've watched Roots, he was a teenager then. So auditory learning, verbal, spoken words, like in a podcast and reflecting on the podcast, like reading a blog and reflecting on the blog, like a Twitter feed and reflecting, or producing a blog. My students write blogs. My students do podcast shows. My students create Twitter accounts. Number 2 is observational learners. Reflect, watch, observe. And so my students might have big questions online that they reflect on, BQOs. There's actually a website for BQO, big questions online. Do you have a soul? What are some major species of eastern forests, and how can we help them survive? All these things, mysterious life questions. So I have my students sign up to be the BQO person for the week. Or I have KWL. What do we know What do we want to know? What would we learn? Reflect, reflect, reflect. Always reflect. Venn diagrams, reflect, reflect, reflect. How do creativity and critical thinking overlap? Role play and debates, questioners in a role play, a comic, a worldly leader, a wise person, a devil's advocate, a planner, a robot. Everyone takes on the roles and then debates with each other. Or interpreting infographics. I post up infographics that they reflect on. I've got 2 or 3 minutes left here. Number 3 is flowcharts, diagrams, visuals, pictures. And so the BBC, CNN, and other news organizations, the New York Times, put video on the web for free that you can all use in your classes. We call this a macro context. Having students watch a 2-minute video about climate change or about housing or about interest rates. And then if you teach economics, having them reflect on that 2-minute video. Have them reflect on where the news is going and how it connects to your class. I could talk on, I've written a paper on this 10 years ago, if anyone's interested, and got a couple on how to use video as a tool for creating shared knowledge and shared understanding and communities of practice. And you can do a PMI. What's the pluses of that video? What's the minuses? And what's the interesting things? Reflect, reflect, reflect. Annotating video, making comments on the video or on the discussion. The University of Minnesota not just has Flipgrid, but has created Video Ant to create comments on videos. Someone else created Hypothesis, a very similar tool for annotation. WordSift, word clouds, word it out to visualize the words that are used. Put the words of your syllabus into a word cloud and you'll be real surprised or amazed. My students did it to me after they got their grades and put up on the wall, Dr. Bonk, you use learning too much in your syllabus. You use mobile too much in your syllabus. And they're all laughing at me after they got their grades, of course, That's, then I got them next semester and I took revenge on them. So word clouds, a way to see things verbally and visually. That's dual coding theory in action. Alan Pavio created dual coding theory. He's a Canadian guy. He was in London, Ontario, and he's very famous for this. Finally, kinesthetic learners, tactile learners, games, simulations, role play. And having students use maker spaces to create, having them put their videos, and this is a student of mine, she had created a maker space on STEM for high school students, secondary students. And she made these wonderful videos of student STEM projects. Another student designed a website to explain my class, the entire course on a website. That was pretty good. Another student took my TEC-VARIETY book and she made tutorials of each chapter. She spent 300 hours on her final assignment, believe it or not. She's crazy. Her name is Linda Smith. Linda, you're crazy. Linda spent, the whole semester creating these tutorials. So I created a playlist of all these 10 principles, tone, curiosity, blah, blah, blah. And some of my students came back, they took my class, they're Fulbright scholars, they went back home to New Zealand, to Finland, to Morocco, Botswana, India, and we wrote a book together of how they're using the content of this class. And it just came out this year. It's called Transformative Teaching Around the World, Stories of Cultural Impact, Technology Integration, and Innovative Pedagogy. Dr. Mena Ju and I edited this book. It's a 1,000 to 3,000 word story. So book projects, web projects, all sorts of things. And I also have my students recap what R2D2 is. And so in the chat window, do you remember what R2D2 is? What's 1 or 2 or 3 components of R2D2, if anyone remembers? So in the chat window, did you get any ideas from this half of the talk? 0 if you're lucky. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. How many ideas did you get from part 2, and what do you remember of R2D2? 6 ideas for Andrew and Hasina. 5, okay. 5, 10, very good. Okay, well, your brains are not. Jeremiah, 5, okay. Frank, 4, okay. Malachi, thank you, thank you. Patrick, 5 to 10, still thinking about it. Chantel, 6, okay. Victor, 4. Rena, again, thank you very much. Thank you all. So again, this is just these are just 2 models. And any words you want to share from this, 3 words you want to share from this session. I am bored might be 3 words. If you want to end with 3 words for me, but also on the count of 3, I cannot do this alone. 1, 2, 3. I cannot do this alone. 1, 2, 3. I cannot do this alone. And finally, 1, 2, 3. I cannot do this alone. So thank you all for coming. My notes are in Training Share. My free book is at TEC-VARIETY and papers at Publication Share. My first and last name, kurtbonk.com, is my homepage. My email is there. So again, I thank you for coming to both sessions. Hopefully you can get the sense of things you can do. Thank you, Malachi. Thank you, Anna. And you cannot, I rejoice, and we all know we can't do this alone. But hopefully next year's summit, when we get to that point, all 151 of you will have at least one thing that you've done or seen someone else do with their online, blended, or technology integrated classes. So you all can extend the quality, as was just talked about, and have some quality assurance across South Africa for your online courses and programs, and inspire your students to be the best that we can be, because you know, in the TEC-VARIETY model, the first principle is the most important: tone and climate. Then we can do the other 9. Craig,
right.
Do you want to jump in here and get me to stop talking?
All right. Thanks, Curtis. That was absolutely passionate and inspiring. I can't do it alone, and that's what you shared. We can't do it alone, and that's why we're so grateful to have you and everyone, all these great ideas. You spoke about so many ways of us being interactive, and I think, at the end of the day, some people are saying, which should I choose? And you've got 4 or 5 options. That's what this new age is about. It's an age of choice. And I think that's really important, because choice is where learning happens. It's us having choice. It's our students having choice. So that's absolutely wonderful. Someone asked about, you being energetic and inspiring and how you're going. But people may not know, if you hadn't thought about this, but Curtis has been up since 2 a.m. and at the moment, I think it's 4:44 in the morning for him. And look at that energy. So it just shows you, if you get it right, this can be energetic, even at 4 in the morning. So that's absolutely fantastic.
Craig, I do have a tip for everyone. The way to get energy is be an accountant for a week. And any day you're not an accountant, you'll have lots of energy. Be an accountant for one day, just one day. And any day will be better than that. I hope none of you are accountants out there, but if you are, I apologize to all of you. Craig, take it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Curtis. Right, well, thank you, Curtis, again. Really inspiring, really enjoyed that presentation. And that brings us now through to our short break we're going to have. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and you can continue to post in the chat if you like. But we will be back after 10 minutes, and thereafter we will be having a short presentation on some interesting work done by some students before we go into our panel discussion. So see you in 10 minutes.